Many households classified as having a low or moderate income find it difficult to afford the cost of housing for four basic reasons. Millions of people are unable to afford housing because of its high cost. Because of this, they do not have enough income left over from their monthly wage to cover the expenditures on essential living needs such as food, transportation, medical care, and other things they require in order to maintain their standard of living. Furthermore, if they fail to make their payments on time, they could face eviction or foreclosure. We would be grateful if you could give us a thumbs up and like this video so that we may continue to upload videos on a consistent basis. Thank you in advance for your feedback. What might be the reason that these families are unable to find a location that is affordable for them? We can break down the key reasons for this into four categories. Number 4. Incomes for many workers are just too low compared to the cost of housing. There is a prevalent misunderstanding that people who work full-time are able to afford housing, but this is not the case. There are certain housing markets in which only those who earn an hourly rate of $30 or more can afford to live comfortably. There is not a single metropolitan location in which full-time workers earning the federal minimum wage are able to comfortably afford the costs of a typical rental home with 2 bedrooms within the city. This is the case in every single metropolitan district. If a worker wants to be able to buy a normal apartment with 2 bedrooms, they need to earn an average of $20-30 per hour in order to provide for their living expenses. To put it another way, a person who is receiving the federal minimum wage of $7.25 per hour would need to work nearly 3 full-time jobs in order to be able to purchase a basic apartment that has 2 bedrooms of living space. Instead of getting better, the situation is becoming worse. This is a very concerning trend. The majority of workers with low and moderate earnings have seen their incomes remain basically stable, despite the fact that the cost of housing has grown. Number 3. The third reason is closely related to the fourth. For-profit developers generally don't respond to the demand for housing among lower-income households. Profit-driven developers typically do not address the housing demand among individuals with lower incomes. There is a close connection between this third reason and the fourth cause, which is the next reason. It is not because they do not want to, but rather because they are unable to do so. This is the actual explanation for this. Because of the cheap prices and rentals that are now available, a significant number of consumers are unable to afford to pay rents and home prices that are sufficiently high to cover the expenses associated with the construction and operation of newly created housing. Some households' earnings are not substantial enough to cover the cost of maintaining and insuring their existing housing, making it impossible for them to afford even the most basic of housing expenses. Number 2. A second problem is that certain types of government regulation raise production costs and reduce the overall supply of all types of housing. The second problem is that specific government regulations increase production costs and reduce the overall supply of all types of housing. This phenomenon is what people mean when they talk about the second problem. For instance, the number of houses built on currently available land is limited. In addition, the permissions procedure can be difficult and time-consuming, which can slow down the development process and even compel developers to relocate to a different location. This makes it difficult for the supply of housing to keep up with the increases in demand and rising house prices that are occurring across the whole housing market. Overall, the housing market is witnessing these trends. In spite of the fact that it may appear counterintuitive, the fact that there are constraints placed on the development of middle and high-end housing that also have an influence on the affordability of property in the lower half of the market is actually factual. When there is a lack of building services for households with moderate and high incomes, it has a negative influence on others who are further down the economic spectrum. This is because households with intermediate and high incomes tend to drive up rents on units that would otherwise be fairly inexpensive. This is the reason why it is the case. There are numerous reasons why the government imposes these restrictions. However, it is crucial to remember that homeowners and their families frequently bear the brunt of increases in construction costs. We should consistently keep this in mind. To determine whether or not these limitations are unavoidable and whether the advantages outweigh the costs, which can amount to tens of thousands of dollars per unit, we must at the very least take a thorough look at the limits that have an impact on development expenses. This will allow us to identify as much as possible. Despite the fact that the reduction of regulations will not be sufficient to bring down costs to the point where new housing development for low-income households can be economically viable without the assistance of the government, it may make housing more affordable for families that fall somewhere in the middle of the income spectrum. Number 1. The ultimate problem is a lack of government funding. One of the most recent problems is that the government is not providing an adequate amount of budgetary resources. The federal government, state governments, and local governments all contribute financing to a variety of programs that successfully house millions of people in order to increase the number of homes that are available at costs that are affordable to an increasing number of people. Sadly, these initiatives are not progressing in a way that would allow them to fulfill the criteria of the current scenario. The amount of federal housing aid has either remained the same or decreased over the previous 15 years. At the same time, the number of renters with extremely low incomes, less than 50% of the average monthly income, has been expanding, despite the fact that the quantity of support has remained the same or decreased. Currently, the government provides housing assistance to approximately 1 out of every 4 qualified households that are facing housing challenges. Those interested in learning more about how they can make a difference in the world should visit the website of Local Housing Solutions. We are grateful that you are watching. We would be grateful if you would give our YouTube channel a like and subscribe to it with your YouTube account.